Okay, welcome back to part 3. Next up I'm going to construct the x-axis for the printer, and I'm going to use all of these parts. I have the two 8mm smooth rods for the x-axis and one more of the stepper motors, the remaining piece of your GT2 belt, which should be about a meter, a little less, and the pulley should have 7 linear bearings, and the X carriage and the 2 X ends, the motor end and the idler end. And then for hardware, I have some zip ties. I have the idler components, which is the printed bearing guide, an M4 by 20mm screw and nut, and a 624 bearing. And then I have a M3 by 30 screw and nut, and this little spring is used for the Z endstop adjuster. This is a fairly low tension spring. You can use just about anything that'll fit over that screw. And then there are 3 M3 by 14mm screws for attaching the motor, and 2 M5 nuts that will go into the 2 ends, and then the end stop, which will be for the X. Will be our X limit switch, and mounting hardware for it, which is 2 more 14mm M2 screws and nuts. Okay, to start out, get your 2 X ends and get 4 of the linear bearings, and 2 of the linear bearings are going to go into each one of these. This is a press-in fit. It should be tight, and you just push these in with the palm of your hand until they are all the way flush with the end, like that. And just put one in each side. That one seems a little bit tight. Sometimes there will be a little bit of plastic that's keeping this clamp, this clamping piece from opening up, so you might have to clean that out. In this case, it's just a tight fit. There we go. There. Just press those in, just like that. I've used a number of different X-end styles. Some have screws that hold the bearings tight, but I hate to use more screws than are really called for, and these seem like they really hold together very well. Okay, now that that's done, get the X carriage and the last 2 linear bearings, and these just sit here. And then you'll need 6 small zip ties to fix those into place. Now when you put these in, if you can think of it, try to get them so that the knuckle of the zip tie isn't in here towards the middle, because our belt is going to go in here later. So the less stuff we have, and these screw heads also where we mount the extruder, so the less stuff you have in the middle there, you know, the better. So just wouldn't be the end of the world if you didn't do that, but might make life easier. I'll grab my scissors and I'm just going to trim these all off. Okay, so we've got that. Now the motor end here, I've added this little gizmo off to the side which holds a screw which is kept tense by this little spring, and the bottom of this screw is what's going to strike against our Z endstop that we put on the upright frame earlier. And by having this mounted to here with the spring, we can adjust the height by real small increments just by turning this screw after the printer is all set up. And that adjusting the Z height before your print is real important. You do it quite a bit if anytime the height of the bed changes for one reason or another relative to the extruder, then you end up having to tweak it to get the first layer to stick well. So this was the solution I came up with, and that hole gets a little filled up, so sometimes the screw isn't ready to come through there. There we go. And then on the bottom there's a small indent where the M3 nut ideally should go. See if you can get that in there. That'll keep that from spinning. This is another occasion where the tip of a soldering iron, if you just pushed against here, you could get this nut to sink down into the plastic. Obviously you don't want to sit there all day long and melt something else, but then when it cools it forms a real tight fit right around the nut. It's not a bad idea. I think I've got mine in there well enough, so I'll just leave it like that and then a little further for now. So now each time you turn, when the printer's set up, each time you turn this screw one revolution, it'll adjust the height of the Z-axis by 0.8 millimeters. So a quarter turn will give you 0.2, so it's a lot easier to adjust than fiddling with the endstop. And while we're on this one, so the M5 nuts are here for the Z-axis threaded rods. Will turn through these, and that's what will actually lift the X-axis up and down. So there's a little trap built into each of the two X ends for the nuts. So you put the M5 nut over there, and actually what I really like for these are channel lock pliers like this, because they grab the two ends are kind of stay parallel, and then see how nicely that goes down in there. That way you're pushing, you know, the pliers are pushing evenly on both sides, so that you are not going to break the plastic, because you break this little piece off of here and then you got trouble. You'd have to try to glue it back on well enough that at least you could print a replacement. And those nuts should be flush. They can't be cockeyed. If they're cockeyed, life will be bad. Okay. Now let's get the idler hardware. So just like our Y-axis, the idler here is a 624 bearing with this little plastic guide. pop the bearing inside there, like that. Then this, it sits inside here, and I have it upside down. Goes in here, and then the M4 screw pops through there, and there's a, you'll see a hexagonal, it's probably hard to see, but there's a little hexagonal inset on this side for the nut. So just turn it enough and then push that down into the spot where it's supposed to go, and get a screwdriver and tighten it. Don't tighten it and snap this, you know, it's just supposed to stay just like that. An M4 lock nut you could also use, would stay put, and a lot of times I prefer those, but I haven't, because this has this inset, I've never had a problem with this backing out, so I just use a cheaper nut. Now get the, we'll go back to this one, get the end stop. Another thing that I've added to the motor end is this little sticky out for the end stop mount, just to try to bring the number of parts down on the printer and make it a little bit more straightforward to put together. So this, when our printer is assembled, let's see how's this going to go. It's going to go like this on the printer, up that way. So our end stop will sit here like this, and the little lever, the X carriage, will come along and it'll push that switch, and that's what will tell the electronics that we're at the end of the X axis. So with that in mind, just hold that there, and then if you look up just a little bit, there's a slot built into the side. I put that there for a zip tie so that you can get some strain relief on these little wires. So you can zip tie the wires up against the body. And then similarly, there's a little tunnel built into the top, and that is for threading the wire through. So it keeps it all real neat and tidy. Unfortunately, sometimes when this prints, the overhang plastic kind of gums it up, so you have to take a file and clean it out. Also, if your wire, you know, doesn't have this little connector on it yet, it's a lot easier to get the wires through there. I've already got them on there. I might have to take them out, get that through there. Maybe not. Or maybe. Let me get something. I've got these little metal tweezers which will let me pop these out of the housing. Now they'll just go right through there, and I'll put them back in. It doesn't matter which side which goes in because it's just a switch. But they do have a, there is an up and a down, so it only latches in if it's pushed in, right? There you go. Okay, so I'm going to let the lever point down on this one. Just bend the wires out of the way enough. You might have to even bend the little posts that are on the bottom of the switch if they stick up too far. Just be gentle. Just until you can see down through there and get the M2 screws. Drop them a couple times. There we go. And we want the, see how my screws are, a lot longer than they would absolutely have to be, but you want the loose end to stick out because our rods are going to go through these holes. So if you put them on the wrong way, that one will interfere. You'll have to do it again. Pull that enough, like that, and then if you want a little added protection against that getting pulled, you put a zip tie through that little slot. It's hard to print the little slots. And I just need to file that out. This file's too big. Here I've got a smaller one, or one with a finer point. There we go. Leave that like that. Trim it off. Alright. Now get the two rods. I'll move all of this out of the way. And these, for the printer I'm building, are 380 millimeters each, and they're the same length. These don't have to be exactly the same length as it happens, but that's what they are ideally. And they should slide into these two ends. Make sure when you're putting them on that, like, the M5 nuts should be on the same side, like this would be wrong. If they don't slide in, oops, nice the first try like this, then cleaning those out with a drill, would be an option. Oh, no, I made the first mistake there. I forgot to put our X carriage on. So this goes with the one bearing up, and the bearings go to the back side. So slip that on. And slip on the other side. Like that. So that's essentially our X-axis. Now we will, there isn't anything that holds these two, there isn't anything as part of this assembly that holds these two together. They'll actually be held in place by the smooth rods for the Z-axis, which will go through these bearings. But now turn this over, and actually don't turn this over, get the motor. The motor's going to go right here so that the shaft of the motor needs to have access to this slot. And I'll put the wires to the bottom. So this is the bottom towards me. And get the 3 M3 by 14 screws and attach the motor. Okay, and get your pulley, pop it on there. Now this motor does have a D-shaped shaft, so I'll take make sure I line up one of the set screws with that and push it down. Actually, it's going to need to go the other way so that the pulley side is down towards the motor and the set screw side is actually on the outside of the shaft, or towards the end of the shaft. And push that down, line it up here. You can see the pulley is going to rest on there and then go through the end, so it needs to be pushed down just almost to as far as it'll go, but not quite. Then get a Allen wrench for the pulley, wherever that went.